Sarah, thanks for coming on the podcast.
No worries, Jack.
I'm excited to have you here.
Yes, you never know what will happen, hey?
It is we'll dive into it. It is a funny story how I got in contact with you, and I really wanted to get you on the podcast to talk about certain things. But I've seen in your bio, and I want to start with this, our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. Who said that quote? Where did you hear it? And what does it mean?
So most people would attribute it to Nelson Mandela in one of his famous speeches. It was actually a woman writer that wrote the speech. So our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate, but we're powerful beyond measure. And it kind of goes on to say it is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. And who are you to be brilliant, talented, gorgeous, fabulous? And goes on to say, who are you not to be? So it's sort of like a bit of a reverse psychology to some extent. You know, a lot of Australian kind of psyche is we have this tall poppy syndrome, or we don't like to big up ourselves or be our own hype person. But this is kind of like an intrinsic inner worth kind of value that you have in yourself. Who am I to be gorgeous, talented, fabulous? And when people their lights do shine, you know, your eyes light up, then you meet awesome people and you can see light in other people's journey as well.
I agree. So where were you when you first heard that?
Yeah, I reckon I was quite young. Like, I grew up in country Victoria, and I just loved like little quotes. There was like Gandhi quotes, or like this idea that another world is possible. I kind of had that nature from a young age. I didn't quite know what it was yet, but I just knew that there was a bigger picture.
Do you know what it is now?
Yeah, I mean, so another world is possible is actually my email address. I've kept that, and I do think my journey has been a little bit like paid work and, you know, having to do what it is to get by, but then also having a sense of purpose or a drivenness to why you're working, or a career. Not even a career, probably like a catalyst for social change. And any decisions that I make for work have to do around that purpose. How
did you find that? Like, where does that come from? Have you always known that from a young age, or is that something you've just developed?
Yeah. I mean, my parents were Salvation Army ministers. So they, the Salvation Army is a church, but also a social services. So they were actually in charge of the social services side in Shepparton, which is a small rural town. And we actually were raised with like people at the table for dinner. Like, they could be homeless, they could be an addict or something like that. And I was always introduced to diverse ways of life and being. So I kind of knew I wasn't just me. I knew that I'm in a family, but I'm in a bigger picture in relation to other people. Wow. Yeah.
And then what are you doing now, and how'd you get into that?
Yeah. So it's a crazy story I was just sharing when we were walking up here. I'm actually an academic now, but I call myself a pracademic. So I don't ever want to sit in the ivory tower of a university. I actually work at RMIT University, but I'm really embedded in community, and mostly with people from African descent, I would say, is where I've kind of ended up, which seems really unusual because I'm obviously white-skinned white girl from the suburbs. But I've got a fascinating tale of just meeting people from all walks of life and travelling to different parts of South Sudan.
And so many avenues I want to go down. So what drew you to that? Why Sudan?
Yeah. So I think my field is kind of youth work, community development work, and to some extent international development work. But when I was studying that, it was kind of there were flavors of saviorism, or this idea that I'm going to go make something better somewhere else, or I've got something that's going to solve someone else's problems. And I kind of found at a young age, I was living in Dandenong, the suburb at the time, which has about 235 different languages spoken. This was a resettlement zone for people from South Sudan from about 2004. So I'd moved to the area around then, and I was working for the Salvos actually, just in like an intake, helping out with material aid and stuff like that. So I was probably 20, 21, and some people who'd frequently come into the service were like, do you want to come to South Sudan with us? We're going to build a school. This is the first time we're going back since, the war or conflict. And I was like, sure, why not?
Was that your first time going overseas?
Not overseas, but probably definitely to a conflict zone.
Yeah.
And South Sudan at the time, it was 2008. In 2005, they just had a peace agreement where the conflict had settled. So this was kind of like 3 years where it was still highly militarized zone.
Yeah. What was that like?
Yeah. Well, it was quite crazy. I'll get into that in a moment. But I guess the main point is that it was the relationship that drew me there, and it wasn't me finding a place on the map and going, South Sudan, I'm going to go and save them or something like that. So they had this concept called Ubuntu, which is Xhosa, or a South African language, and it kind of means I am because you are. So my humanity is bound up with your humanity, and if you are liberated or free from conflict, then I'm liberated and free. Even in the West, we're kind of bound together. We just don't realize it. When you think about climate change and stuff, people in Africa are hit quite a lot quicker, and we might not see it immediately, but if they're hit, we're going to be hit at some point as well.
And okay, so you get over there.
Yeah.
How long were you there for?
So the first time was about 6 weeks, and we actually had to go through North Sudan. At the time, the country was the same country, North and South. This was like a Arab or Islamic zone or area. So we had to kind of bribe our way or get across the border and travel by a bus from the north to the south, which was kind of unheard of at the time. It was quite crazy to be a part of it. It felt like a movie to some extent.
Yeah, I bet.
We had our white flag literally, and went off at stop points and said, oh, we're on our way to build a school and this is why we're traveling here.
And when you say we, how many of you were there?
So there was a doctor, I guess he was from an Asian background. There was a builder, just white Aussie bloke who was up for an adventure. There was probably 4 South Sudanese people who were the tour leaders or the people going back to their village. There was a social worker, another chick, and maybe one more. But yeah, we were just a motley bunch of people who'd never really met each other going to build this school. So
I guess, how does it go from that to you coming back to Australia and wanting to help people understand and improve the community here?
So what I found, and the reason I tell that story, is we actually never built the school. Because they hadn't been living in their own local regional area, half the materials got stuck up the Nile River. So I ended up just sitting with community, with women, with young people, and doing, I guess, what I call community consultations. But it's more like sitting in a circle and asking them about their lives and what matters to them. And one of the themes was, do you feel with the conflict that you can replant again or, plant seeds and harvest a crop? And they were more or less saying, no, we feel like day to day we're just surviving. This conflict could arise at any time, and this is our lives at the moment.
Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
So you have in your alchemy, like, how do you find your why?
Yeah.
So does that come from, I guess, how can we use those teachings and those understandings from those communities and improve ours here?
Absolutely. So that was like a pivotal experience, and I then moved back I was still living in Dandenong, but the social worker was working at the Southern Migrant Refugee Centre. So that experience set me on a trajectory to work with former refugee or asylum seeker populations. And I didn't seek out, like, I didn't grow up saying I'm going to work with refugee communities. This idea of alchemy came from a book called The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and my Spanish is not very good, so someone's going to murder me for saying his name wrong. The idea of the alchemist, one of the stories is that this sheep herder sits on a park bench at some point, and you could go through life with your blinkers on. You know, you could be like, I'm having a shit day. I don't want to herd sheep anymore. Why am I in this life? And he looks up and has a conversation with someone on the park bench. And this conversation sets him on a trajectory or a tale where he goes and explores, you know, his purpose or his why. So the analogy kind of is, if you've got your blinkers on, you're not going to see the opportunities around you, the people that you might meet along the way that could lead you to that next step or that next part of the journey.
And before we recorded, we were basically talking about that. A lot of people have their blinkers on and don't realise they're on sometimes.
Yeah.
So how would somebody sort of get rid of those blinkers and open up to the world and look around?
Yeah. I mean, even, like, to be real, this morning, like, I was like, it's Saturday, I'm tired, I've had a big week in university, and I could just be like, oh, it's a glum day, you know, it looks quite dark outside. And then I was like, I can actually choose my self-talk. And I decided to put on some music. I was like, I'm actually going to record a podcast. This is really cool. Who gets to do this? Who knows what will happen after this podcast? And so I kind of chose my thoughts and my actions, put on the music, and that put me in a really good mood and changed my outlook for the day.
But again, that thought process is quite hard for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So is that something you've developed over time, like to catch yourself in those moments of, yeah, it is a glum day outside, and then, oh, hold on, and then start the process of trying to change that mood? Like, where did that come from?
I find it hard because as a youth worker, it's not just like positive psychology. Obviously, people do have trauma, they do have a lot of big things in life, and just telling someone change your mood is not really going to help. So for me, it comes back to those intrinsic messages of self-worth and that start of that quote, the Marianne Williamson quote. You know, what do I want to see in my life? And do I just want to go by the status quo, or do I want to live an excellent, adventurous life? So catching myself is like, no, I do get to decide, you know, I'm now 40, like this is my next stage of my journey. Yeah.
Do you journal?
As an academic, I don't get to as much, but what I did start doing was spoken word, and that's because I worked with a lot of artists as a youth worker. So we worked with hip-hop artists, spoken word artists, and dance artists, and I organised a lot of events, festivals, pop-up performances, and flash mobs. And it was actually that artistic journey of working with artists that I was like, I actually want to learn what it means to go through the steps. So the process of writing a spoken word, sometimes there might be a word or like a theme such as purpose, and if I sit down, it might be in my sleep, or I have like a notebook next to my bed, I might write that sentence. And sometimes the flow comes, like it's like a spiritual experience. A poem could come out of that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's real cool. So how does, I guess, the art side of things fit into this? When did you when did you start understanding that dance, music, art plays a big role in, I guess, motivation and finding purpose and that self-talk?
So after I got back from South Sudan, I started meeting a lot of young people who were hip-hop artists. They'd be rapping, but like maybe they'd be performing in front of their mirror, brushing their teeth or something. But in the area, there was nowhere for them to perform. There's youth services, but sometimes services don't often know how to reach out to culturally diverse communities and find out what their why is or what makes them tick. So hip-hop was something that I found was a bridge between us. I actually liked hip-hop myself, and I went to New York and I tried to find like where the birthplace of hip-hop was, where the first hip-hop party was. And I was also listening to conscious hip-hop lyrics. So that kind of helped us relate quite a bit. And I got to know their journey and the day-to-day struggles of what it means to live in Australia as a former refugee young person.
Do you think there's something in, I guess, putting it out on paper and wrapping it as some sort of therapy?
Yeah.
Like getting those words out, is it just as the same as journaling through it or going through a therapy session? Like, because I enjoy hip-hop as well. And the origins of hip-hop. And you can definitely see or feel, especially in those old days of hip-hop, you can feel the lyrics and you can feel the struggle they go through. Have you practiced, like you said, you practiced writing songs and that sort of stuff?
Yeah.
How do you go from, I guess, putting words on a piece of paper to making it feel like really getting it in the feel of the song, like when you're singing it or rapping it?
I think the difference between therapy and something like an arts therapy is that it's an embodied experience. Like hip-hop is quite visceral in terms of even spoken word. You have to put your body into it, or like your whole soul goes into the process. And that's what the streets are like. Some of the songs of like Fuck the Police are literally like, excuse the language for the podcast, for those that might offend, but it's the day-to-day experiences of being stopped and searched or stopped on the street daily. And even young people in Dandenong were facing that in the studio when I would be recording with them. They'll be like, Sarah, I was in my high school uniform. I came to the Dandenong police station. I keep getting harassed every time I come into this area.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So any, I guess, takeaways or anything from that time where you were helping those kids rap and all that sort of stuff? Like, is there anything that I guess everybody listening could take away and use?
I think it still comes back to Ubuntu. Like, I wasn't necessarily helping them or they weren't helping me. We were actually, our humanity was bound together. And what I mean by that is, when I got to know some of their stories, one young person was murdered in Noble Park. He was a South Sudanese young person, and in the national media it said that it was a Sudanese gang that had killed him, and that Noble Park was like a Los Angeles ghetto at the time. And it actually turned out that it was a race hate crime, and that 2 Caucasian people had killed him, and there was graffiti of racist slangs, in the area. So I could no longer walk away. Once I knew these people and their journey, this story became my story, and these people became my friends and my family. So I was given like a name, Nyagwa, and that means that my sense of justice or passion for systemic change has now been embedded in African diaspora communities, which is very bizarre. Yeah.
What lessons can we take from like their culture, their way of living, to help us? What was the phrase you were using? That
Ubuntu,
Ubuntu.
I am because you are.
How can we, things like that? Because I grew up in the country as well.
Yeah.
Moving to Melbourne, experiencing a whole different wider range of different cultures, different peoples. It's absolutely amazing to see different perspectives. Like one thing I thought was just normal, a different culture doesn't even look at that, and they look at it a completely different way.
Yes.
It's so cool to see those. So what learnings or what things like that can we learn from to improve our own, I guess, lives and people around us?
Absolutely,
relationships?
yeah. So because your listeners are interested in sport and fitness and stuff like that, later on I went back to South Sudan to do a basketball peace tournament, and I also love basketball, and so did the young people in the villages of South Sudan. But some of those young people actually had conflict with each other. They were cattle raiding their villages and causing torment to each other. And it was basketball that brought them together. It sounds very simplistic, but literally they would come from neighbouring villages, see each other and be like, you are responsible for this. And it could have escalated very quickly. But they started playing some games of basketball. We had a meal together. They had to stay in the same accommodation. And by 3 days, they were saying to each other, I can go to your village now and say, I know you. There was this connection, simple as basketball, that brought them together.
Wow.
So it's finding like people's passions and their joys and their why and connecting on what makes them light up. I think you can get to know people from around the world just by that curiosity.
Let's just say somebody has that curiosity,
Yeah.
but they're feeling a bit intimidated and they want to go find, say, a club, a basketball, soccer or football, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're from. What would you say to that person who's a little bit hesitant of going out and reaching out or joining a club?
I mean, to me, it's like a relational journey. And so it's doing a bit of research and maybe even just a taster or, going to watch a game or, just being around. And like that park bench moment, it's that being around and putting yourself out of your comfort zone. It feels awkward because you're just like, I don't know anyone here. They don't know me. What am I doing here? But you might have just one little conversation or one moment, a smile maybe, that could spark. Or someone says, oh, do you want to come try out? Or, the next step presents itself. But I guarantee you all of those steps are never apparent. Like it's that very small, minute step that will lead you to the next thing. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. I like it. Just going back to the basketball game, who set that up?
Yeah. So again, it wasn't me going, oh, basketball is going to bring conflict-torn people together. It was the local community who said we want to set up a peace and reconciliation basketball tournament. And so again, my friends who are local are leading this and getting the funding for it themselves. And they're like, hey, you seem to be interested, and probably I have some skills in conflict resolution and training for peace, so I can play basketball. That helped. That's probably why I was there as a bit of a not a buffer, but like a bridge between those worlds. Yeah.
So you say skills in conflict resolution. What's that?
So for example, immediately when the young people got there to play basketball, what we found was that it was because they don't have jobs in South Sudan. Young people are treated, as second-class citizens. That's why they're stealing each other's cattle. It's not actually because they hated each other, like this tribe, I don't like you, even though that is the narrative sometimes. once we got them to talk about what is it like to be a young person in this village, oh yeah, I have the same struggles, they could break it down and see that it wasn't the beef that they had with each other that was the most important thing. So they were like, actually the government needs to give us, or we need to create more jobs or do something different with our lives. We can't rely on this cattle raiding as our source of income.
Why are the youth treated as second-class citizens, or I don't know, less, I guess you could say?
It's a really complex story. So I just found in South Sudan specifically, there's been like 50 years of conflict, maybe even more. Some of that's to do with religion, some of that's to do with elitism or, you know, money and power mostly. And so even now when the South became its own country, South Sudan, the leaders are still military leaders. They were like generals in the army. They're not necessarily state leaders or diplomats. And so this perpetual like corruption is continued on.
Yeah, that's scary. So how do the young people go from going from South Sudan to coming to Australia? Like, that would be a very big different culture shock.
Yeah.
The person that put us, or recommended you, Sarah, we've spoken about this in the past, like how she sees a lot of young people come over from South Sudan, and just even like, because obviously we talk about like health and fitness or moving your body, all that sort of stuff. They go from almost like a place of scarcity, and again, this is just an example of food. Yeah. But then coming here, and you can get food
There's so
in
much
abundance.
choice, yeah.
So they go from being, I guess, malnourished in a certain way to then like going the extreme opposite, because they just don't know how to assimilate to that new culture of just an abundance of food. Like, you don't, like, no one really teaches you how to say no to food. That's something you've got to learn, and it's a hard lesson to learn. And that's like most of my job, trying to teach people like just to say no sometimes. Yeah. So that's one example, but are there other examples of that, like that I guess youths would struggle, like, because it is a big difference in the culture. Like you said, they've just got no jobs. Like, they go from stealing other tribes' cows to then over here. Yeah. Like, there's obviously, you can almost do anything you want work-wise. Obviously, there's other avenues that would almost drag them in to, like, I guess, like crime and all that sort of stuff would be very appealing as well. So, yeah, what are some sort of differences there and like struggles?
I think everyone's looking for a sense of purpose, and when you're told you don't fit in, you don't belong, you look different, I guess in terms of Australia, having a huge community with noticeably darker skin was quite new at the time. We've got people of African descent, but it was quite a big influx of refugees from African backgrounds. That created a lot of narratives in the nation around who belongs and who doesn't. So I won't get into that, but that idea of integration is you have to fit in to look more like us, like as white people, for example, instead of you actually offer something to our society and maybe we could learn more about communal culture, for example, as opposed to individualism, which is what we're used to. So I think in terms of when people choose criminality or other lucrative forms of business, often, you know, their home life, their family, their parents may have had a really good job. You know, they could be a doctor or a lawyer, but here they have to work and do Uber or something like that. So the generations of people are now, you know, having some narratives of like, you don't belong, you're no good. So with hip hop, it was like a sense of purpose. I actually have something to offer. I have a voice. I can actually record and make money from this. It might be better than trying to steal a car, for example. But that's a culture shift that takes a lot of time. So helping people find their why, I think, and what they're good at and their skills is a good step.
Any tips or ways of thinking on trying to find somebody's why? Somebody listening?
Yeah,
wants
I
to
think
find
so.
their why?
Yeah. So I'm a youth work practitioner, but what I teach at RMIT in youth work is what's called reflective practice. So you might do an action or a project. For example, student might be doing placement. Say they're placed at a youth alcohol and other drug centre. My job is to ask some curious questions, similar to what you're doing now. Oh, so you met the young people. How did that go? Oh, these young people presented this way. Why do you think it is that they came from these backgrounds? It's asking those curious questions and helping us build in a reflective practice, such as I was able to do this morning. Oh, I can reflect and go, oh yeah, no, I can ask myself these questions as well.
Love that. That's good. And you've recently written a book?
Yeah.
What's the book?
Yeah.
What's it about?
So it's called Born to Stand Out. And again, it's kind of a narrative instead of trying to fit in to culture. Most people are born to stand out. They're individuals who have passions and interests. In this case, it's young South Sudanese hip-hop artists. And the rest of the book is called Hip Hop and Political Voice for Young South Sudanese Australians. So we had the book launch last week, which is how we met your colleague, Sarah. And it was on the rooftop of RMIT. Some of these young people I'd met when they were 13 or 14. This is like a good 15 years ago. And they were trying to find like a dance studio they couldn't practice. So they would travel all the way into Fed Square to use the mirrors just to dance. And they ended up getting booked out for these big performances in Australia and stuff like that.
Wow.
So fast forward to now, I've got to journey with them throughout their lives. And that's probably a bit different from traditional youth work where you only know someone for 6 months or they're a case and not a person with a culture and a community. So yeah, the book was just to bring all of the hip-hop artists that I journeyed with together to understand the narratives. And some of their hip-hop narratives were saying things like, we're not criminals, we're not gangs. It was what I called a counter-narrative. And the daily things that they faced, like I was saying about systemic racism for the young person that was murdered.
And why do you think now was a good time to write the book?
Yeah. So it actually took quite a few years.
Okay.
And I think that's probably a good way just to a segue into like, if you don't know your why and your sense of purpose, I could have very easily given that up. Like the pandemic happened, I was doing my PhD, but I'm more extroverted. So I actually felt quite isolated. I had to actually sit down and write and put all these ideas into paper. And it actually was a discipline that I had to develop. But if I didn't know my why, or I didn't have, say, for example, the deaths of other young people as my reason, I was dedicating this to friends I'd lost, then I don't think I would have been able to see the book journey through. Yeah.
How do you hold on to your why? Because even myself, like I love doing this. I love conversations like this.
Yeah.
I like helping people and getting stories like this to help other people. But sometimes I just question myself, like, why am I doing this? Like it's hard. Well, it's not hard, but sometimes I'm like, there's other things I could be doing.
Absolutely.
All that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
So how do you hold on to that why?
I was asking myself this yesterday, actually, because it's not as just all peachy. And like I said, it's not just positive psychology. I think finding your tribe and finding people, like if I'm having a bad day, I'd be able to say, hey, Jack, like it's actually really hard today. I know my why, but today just doesn't feel like it. Having your tribe where you can find people you relate to, and maybe it is that you go out for a walk or you do something together that is motivational. You cook a good meal together, or find some art or theatre. We do need things that bring us joy, and that keep inspiring us.
I found a lot, I don't know if you could tell me if this is an Aussie thing or not, but it could be to do with the tall poppy syndrome as well, because again, I think that's a big issue within Australia, because everybody's sort of trying to just keep everybody the same instead of, again, pushing them up. Like, you've got a good idea, you're awesome, no matter what you're doing, like, just keep pushing. But it feels like there's almost like a disconnection. Like, a lot of people haven't like got those people that they can reach out to. Like, when you're having a bad day, you can't be like, oh, hey, Sarah, I'm having a bad day. This sort of stuff. A lot of people don't seem to have that, or feel like they don't have that, even though they might have it. Is that an Aussie thing, or is that like a cultural thing you've experienced?
I think it's like a Western thing in terms of the West of the global West. So what I'm talking about is like America, Australia, Canada. We do actually have quite a lot, and we have a lot of choice, but we just, like you said, finding a sense of purpose with so much choice is quite hard. I do think the pandemic did affect interpersonal skills. So we're doing some market research with youth work at the moment. A lot of even people in class are actually struggling, like they might go on placement, but they don't know how to be in a lunchroom together, or, you know, ask a colleague to go out for a coffee. And so rebuilding that sense of inner intrinsic worth and strength is probably, you know, an important narrative that we could rebuild back into our psyche.
Yeah, I 100% agree on that. I've noticed that as well within myself, like coaching, like, I guess, say 50-year-old compared to a 20-year-old. There's big differences now in their ability to communicate. So I guess that would stop them from, I guess, reaching out when they do feel down to those people they have around them, but don't feel like they don't have them around them. So, but if we go to South Sudan, if a young person is feeling down and out, do they have like a support crew? Like, is it normal to go, oh, hey, I'm feeling a bit down, like, let's cook a meal together? Is it normal over there, like in South Sudan, to do that?
It's probably not translatable in that analogy, because it's very hard to explain, but we're in the West. When I say the West, like I said earlier, we're very individualistic. In South Sudan, it's very communal. It's actually intrinsic that you're eating together, and you might have the same meal and everyone's digging in with their hands. So the visuals are very different. It's probably more taboo for them to say, I'm not doing well. That's not really in the vocabulary. And probably here as well, it's probably not.
Just a side note, one thing I have been sort of like this same topic, just trying to get people to find the purpose. I find Australians, and I don't know where it's come from, but we always compare things to not being bad. Like, how's your day? Oh, not bad. How did you sleep? Oh, not bad. How was that day out with? Oh, it wasn't bad. I'm like, why do you always compare things to not being bad?
It's just like this mediocreness, isn't it?
Like, why can't it just be, it was awesome? Like, I've noticed that more and more lately, the more I dive into this topic. And I don't know where it comes from.
And I catch myself doing that too, because this idea that you're busy and that you're in demand, and, you know, I have that constantly. So I could just be trapped in, like, I might sound like a parrot to my friends or family if it's like, oh yeah, I'm just so busy. Like, that narrative could get stuck in your brain. So changing that narrative, like, oh, I actually get to do the most excellent things in my job. It does keep me busy, but I'm going to develop a self-care journey, or, you know, a resilience journey to find out what my why is or my passion.
I guess that is another part of the Western world, like, you know, a part of trying to be the best version of yourself and keep pushing, keep getting better, keep helping people. You do get busy. So how do you sort of juggle that busyness, trying to grow relationships, community, all that sort of stuff? Like, again, for myself, I struggle sometimes. I dive too much into work and this sort of thing, and then my relationships fall apart. Well, not fall apart, but you know,
they suffer a bit. Yeah.
So how do you go about, you know, managing all that?
I think people's self-care journey is different, but it is documenting a few things that do bring you joy. So it's daily things like a holiday or something to look forward to, so that it doesn't just feel bleak. It's like, I know in July I'm actually going to be going to Bali. Not everyone gets to go to an overseas holiday, but whatever it's the equivalent. I think in terms of a sports analogy, we often have mountains and we just see something as the mountain that I have to climb, instead of just like, here's the first peak that I have to get to. Today I'm going to, maybe put on my hiking shoes or like something, I'm going to have a walk around or do some stretches or something, to break down things. So that analogy is also like finding things that bring you joy. It's like, okay, on Saturday, I know that I need to walk because I've actually been in the office, this long, or I need to get outside. Yeah.
Do you ever get to the point where you sort of forget and have to remind yourself? Like, do you put it in a calendar, or is it just like an internal thing that you're like, oh, I have been sitting in the office for too long, I need to get out?
I would suggest it is helpful to people to put little reminders and stuff like that. I'm probably very creative, so I don't have anything that looks structured in that way. Mine's more like going off the vibe and, like feeling energies and stuff. So I'm not like a prototype in
I did hear
regard.
A good quote the other day. Somebody saying that if they don't keep a calendar or a diary or anything, so if they forget about it, it's obviously not important. So if they remember and it's a good vibe, they're going to remember, they'll be there.
Yeah,
so I think if you can get to that point, that's a good point to be at. So going back to the youths, like, is it, I especially with health and fitness, I think if we can inspire the younger generations to get moving, because health and fitness is a lifetime journey.
Yeah.
So it's not like you can just, do it when you're 50 for 5 years and you're done. It's a 50-year journey. So if you can start when you're 20, you're going to be way better off when you are 50.
Yeah.
So how would you go about trying to inspire the next generation to get into health, fitness?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think everyone's so different. Like, some people really do feel inspired by the gym and, personal goals of leg day and this sort of day. Finding what kind of mode of fitness helps you. For me, I like nature, and doing something like going for a walk or a run out in nature's kind of going to help me, whereas being in the gym is not something that I would be my first go-to. But I've spent a lot of time now with the dance community. So some of my friends are Jamaican dancehall instructors or Afrobeats instructors, and fitness can be found through dance. And, actually the endorphins are running, and this carefreeness of like having to look good can be released. It doesn't always have to be choreographed. It could just be like learning why does this community do this dance move? And so it's, again, finding your tribe of fitness. Like, I got into stand-up paddleboarding. I just bought a paddleboard. I Googled, like, how do I paddleboard? And that's been a source of joy. I put it on my bucket list to get my scuba license.
Oh, yeah.
It was bloody hard. But again, like, that analogy of doing something that really scared me was kind of appeasing to me. But also during the training of the scuba, like, it was a very disciplined activity. So I had to use my self-talk. I was doing the course with 2 14-year-olds, and I was like, well, if they can do it, like, surely I can. So I rocked up the next day at 5 a.m. Yeah.
Nice. I love paddleboarding as well. Been paddleboarding for ages. Started when I was 23 or something. Yeah, it's good fun. Really enjoy that.
And there's so many Facebook groups now of random people who might have a thing that they like paddleboarding. Another one was I liked looking for the aurora. So like a group of people who are like, oh, the aurora seems to happen at this time. And so you just meet lots of random people. Yeah.
technology, again, social media, that sort of stuff can be quite damaging, but I find it can, like, it's just how you use it.
Yeah.
Like, you can find groups that help you come out of your shell and find things that, like, whatever you enjoy doing, there's other people out there to do it.
Yeah.
Is there any, I guess, ways or tips you'd recommend trying to find those little groups?
Yeah. I just like to do a little temperature check of the group first. Like, if it's toxic or there's, like, gossip, that is very rife in sports communities as well. Mm-hmm. It's finding, like, what's something that's not going to be detrimental to your mental health. How do people talk about each other in this community? You might check the chat, groups. Is it being moderated, for example? There's a few things that I kind of, look out for.
All right. So where can people, is there anybody through your journey with the book you followed a bunch of people with their rapping careers?
Yeah.
Who are they? What are they doing? Where can we find them?
Yeah. So a lot of the young people, I was interested to see whether they would be massive hip hop artists in Australian music industry. And the actual music industry in Australia is quite challenging and, again, not as diverse as it could be. So one example would be Deng Tabir. He's still an artist. I think his Instagram handle's like Tabir, Tebir. And he's still like a R&B artist or vocalist, but he's actually a youth worker as well, and he works at schools. So there's people like Deng, there's Malesh P, Malesh P. He's also an artist and he works in youth justice. There's Queen P, who's working in youth justice in Alice Springs at the moment. So most people have the hobby of music, but then they're doing a day job at the same time.
That's so cool. I'll definitely add them to the show notes, so check them out.
Yeah,
I've been a big fan of Aussie hip hop for a long time.
Yes.
And it does, like, following some of the small artists, it did seem like, it was quite hard. And they had to do their day job on the side.
Yes.
Which I think might turn a lot of people off, but I think it's actually a good thing as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to the youth you work with, what are you doing with them now? And what would be their goal in the future?
Yeah. I was just going to say one person that did break through is Sampa the Great, which she's a Zambian artist and is now like a more global artist. But a lot of Sampa's narratives of like how hard it was is a very interesting story in and of itself. So the work I do with young people now, I guess I'm training the next generation of youth workers at RMIT by being the program manager of youth work and youth studies. So I'm sort of sharing all my OG stories, like how did I work at a drop-in centre, or how did I work in a studio? What are the skills, interpersonal skills required to be able to walk into a studio with someone who potentially has done a lot of criminal behaviour? It could be feeling threatening, but how do you break the ice and get to know them as a real person is sort of the strategies I'm teaching at the moment.
And if you could fast forward 40 years into their careers, what would be the one goal you'd hope they all have, like, I guess, outcome, you could say, that they all have? Like, what would be, in an ideal world, like, what could happen?
I mean, I really hope that someone does make it big. That's been some of their goals. But I don't know about you, but as a young person, like, I've met a lot of even dudes in the US who want to be a rapper, and then they kind of just like whether get to 30 or 40 and like, oh no, that was just a phase that I went through. It's not so much the actual goal in mind. It's more that they've found a sense of intrinsic happiness, and that this idea that they're not good enough or that they don't fit in, that they've found community and are thriving. Maybe they are doctors and lawyers or business people or local councillors. Some of them have actually gone on to run for, their local council and stuff. That we just start to see people of all walks of life across society, and we have people to look up to who are from diverse backgrounds.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, final question.
Yeah.
You're the governor of, let's just say, Australia.
Yep.
So whatever you say, people have to do, but it's only one thing. So one thing per day. The whole population has to start doing this one thing. What would you get the population to start doing tomorrow? Whatever it is.
Oh my goodness.
I thought I had this question before the podcast, and I thought I knew what you'd say, but after listening to the conversation, I'm not sure what you'd say now. It could be anything. It could be like talking, moving, singing, anything. But every single person has to start doing it.
Yeah. I reckon maybe like find a word of affirmation. Like it could be just something funny, but like a sentence that is like a big up yourself type moment. For me, if it was our greatest fear is not that we're inadequate, like that is actually in my kitchen now, and that's something that I would refer back to. Find like a little sentence or a quote that means something to you, and have it. Like I've even got a picture of Sarah, like little Sarah, up on my mirror in my bathroom.
Nice.
Just like, return to that little quote or that narrative about yourself.
You said you got that quote written down and up on the fridge?
Yeah.
Right. Has it always been there?
I've repositioned it there. It was like just hanging on like a wall somewhere in my house, but I'm like, no, this needs to come back front and center. Yeah. That
seems to be a common theme with a lot of my guests.
Yeah.
Like writing something important down and putting it in front of them.
Yes. True.
Yeah. It's quite interesting. I might need to start doing that one.
Well, funnily enough, I'll finish up with this, but I had to do it for this book launch because some of those inner turmoils of like, who am I to do this? It's not going to go well. It's going to fail. No one's going to come. Like all of that negative self-talk definitely went through my mind. Why should a white girl be launching this book? And I had to return to the why of the relationships. Actually, when I have gone out of my comfort zone, things have worked out. You know, it actually turned out really freaking amazing. But like that journey of getting there, I had to return to that quote and go, what if it actually did work out? What if I am too, talented, fabulous, and look where, you could end up. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, like it comes back to that Aussies just comparing themselves to, that wasn't bad. Like you go through that thought process of, what if this, what if that, with all the negatives, but no one actually thinks of the positive.
Yeah.
Like what if this book has a massive change and completely changes the landscape of the community here in Melbourne? Like no one actually thinks of the upside. They all just think of the downside.
Yeah.
So when you were going through that process of self-doubt, you're looking at that quote, but you did sort of have all this story and I guess backing of you can do this because your book is basically examples of you doing it.
Yeah.
Is that something like you realised? Because I always say it's all well and good to have that positive talk, but you also need to have, I guess, those things to show that you can actually do the thing you're saying you want to do.
Yeah.
Is that something you know, or is that something you, I guess, tried to work on, or is that people from the book, from the community, told you could do it as well?
Yeah. For me, it's important to have a realistic community, and you don't often see it in yourself. People who are close to you see your greatness in you often more than you do yourself. So I had to return to those conversations and sound it out. And some people did ask critical questions, which are good. You do need feedback. But others were really encouraging and were like, go for it, But they just said, again, to do something different. I didn't just want it as an academic traditional approach. I actually did have to go beyond the boundaries of what anyone was saying and actually back myself to try something new. And it paid off. But it was a big experiment. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for actually going through the experiment and doing it.
Yeah.
Where can people learn more about you and find the book?
I reckon LinkedIn's a good place for professional like networking. So Dr. Sarah Williams on LinkedIn, or I think the handle's Sarah_Williams77 or something like that. And just with LinkedIn and things like that, you'll be surprised when you reach out to people how many people respond. You know, not everyone's going to say, yes, I'm willing to be a mentor, but I've just found a huge tribe of people that I never knew. Even at the book launch, people who saw me on LinkedIn came to the book launch. One young person brought a poetry book, and we just decided, because I'd used the word alchemy, she came because I'd used that word, and she's like, oh, that person seems to be my tribe. Something as simple as that. You just don't know who you're going to meet.
I agree. And my own experience, like with this podcast,
yep,
like reaching out to people that I would never think would come on the podcast, and more than like, it's just conversation. So a lot of people that have something good to say are more than happy to at least have a chat about it.
That's right.
So yeah, reach out, communicate. Alchemy, just before we go.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Because you've got it in your bio, and it's sort of come up a couple of times.
Yeah. In the Paulo Coelho book, The Alchemist, it's like, initially I kind of see it as like a conjuring up of like, you know, you put a little bit of this in, a little bit of that, and it creates like some kind of energy. I think it is going to remain this mysterious notion that I can't explain, but it's just like the combination of moments, experiences, awareness, consciousness that can create something powerful. So I'm going to leave it there as a mysterious concept because I can't explain it.
Love it. Yep.
Yeah.
So there, Sarah. Thanks again for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Yeah. Hey,